Story Narae, the art of storytelling.
Welcome to Story Narae Heartwarming Audiobooks. The journey is nearing its end. Dorothy and her friends have come a long way. Let's turn the final pages of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Chapter 19: Attack of the Trees. The next morning, Dorothy gave the pretty green girl a goodbye kiss, and they all shook hands with the green-bearded soldier who came out to see them off from a great distance away from the palace. The gatekeeper was very surprised that they were leaving this beautiful city and heading into a new adventure, but he soon took off their glasses, put them in a green box, and wished them good luck. The goalkeeper said to the Scarecrow,
"You are our ruler, so you should come back as soon as possible."
The Scarecrow answered,
"If possible, I will do so. But first, we must help Dorothy get home."
Dorothy said her final goodbye to the kind-hearted gatekeeper.
"I was treated very warmly in your lovely city, and everyone was very kind to me. I can't express in words how grateful I am."
The goalkeeper answered,
"Not at all, miss. We want you to stay with us, but if you want to go back to Kansas, we hope you find your way back."
As the gatekeeper opened the gate, they came out and began their journey. The sun was shining brightly as our friends turned their faces towards the southern country. They were all so happy that they laughed and chatted together. Dorothy was once again filled with hope that she could go home. The Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman were delighted at the thought of helping Dorothy. The Lion sniffed for air in delight, and his tail swished from side to side in sheer joy as he roamed the plains again. Toto continued to bark happily and run around them, chasing butterflies and moths. As they were walking at a fast pace, the Lion said,
"City life just doesn't suit me at all. I lost a lot of weight while living there. Now I'm looking forward to the opportunity to show other animals how brave I have become."
They turned around for a moment and took one last look at the Emerald City. They could all see the tall buildings and spires rising behind the green walls, and even higher still the roofs and spires of the Palace of Oz. The Tin Woodman said, feeling his heart pounding in his chest,
"Oz wasn't such a bad wizard."
The Scarecrow said,
"He knew how to give me brains, and he gave me very good brains."
The Lion also spoke.
"If Oz had taken a sip of the courage he gave me, he would have been a very brave man."
Dorothy said nothing. It was because Oz had not kept his promise to her. Still, Dorothy decided to forgive Oz because he had done his best. As he said, even though Oz was a bad wizard, he was a good person. On the first day of the trip, we continued walking through the green fields outside the Emerald City. At night, they slept on the grass with the star-filled night sky as their roof. But I was able to rest comfortably. The next morning, they set out again and came to a very dense forest. The forest stretched endlessly to the right and left as far as the eye could see, so it was impossible to go around the forest. Moreover, they were afraid of getting lost and could not even dare to change their direction. So they looked for a place to go into the forest. The Scarecrow, who was walking ahead, finally found a large tree. The tree had thick branches that spread out widely, leaving enough space for the entire party to pass underneath. So the Scarecrow walked towards the tree, but as soon as he stepped under the first branch, the branches began to bend of their own accord, wrapping themselves around the Scarecrow's body. In a split second, the Scarecrow rose into the air and then crashed down headfirst among his friends. The Scarecrow wasn't hurt, but he was very surprised. So even when Dorothy woke him up, he still didn't come to his senses. The Lion said,
"There is another space between the trees here."
The Scarecrow said,
"I'll go first. I'm okay because I won't get hurt even if I get thrown again."
The Scarecrow said this and went to another tree, but the branches of the tree immediately caught him and threw him back. Dorothy spoke up loudly.
"It's really weird here. What do we do now?"
The Lion said.
It seemed as if the trees were determined to fight us to keep us from passing.
Then the woodcutter said,
"I think I can handle this."
He walked briskly to the first tree where he had roughly cut down the Scarecrow, lifting the axe onto his shoulder. As a large branch bent down and tried to grab the woodcutter, he swung his axe fiercely and cut it in two. Then the tree began to shake all its branches as if in pain. So the Tin Woodman was able to pass safely under the tree. The woodcutter shouted to his friends,
"Come here quickly, quickly."
They all ran forward and were able to pass under the tree without getting hurt. But Toto was caught on a small branch and was swinging wildly in the air, crying. But the woodcutter immediately cut off the branch and freed Toto. The other trees in the forest did not attack them to keep them from coming near. So it occurred to me that only the trees standing at the edge of the forest could move their branches. Perhaps the trees had some mystical ability to keep strangers away, like forest police. After that, Dorothy and her friends were able to walk to the other side of the forest without difficulty. As they left the forest, to their surprise, a high wall that looked like it was made of white porcelain stood before them. The wall was smooth as a plate, and rose very high above their heads. Dorothy asked,
"What should we do now?"
The Tin Woodman said,
I will make a ladder. Then I'm sure I can climb up that wall.
Chapter 20: The Country of the Lovely Porcelain. While the woodcutter was cutting down trees in the forest to make a ladder, Dorothy lay down and fell asleep. It was because I was tired and exhausted from walking for a long time. The lion curled up to sleep, and Toto sat down next to him. The scarecrow watched the woodcutter work and spoke to him.
I don't know why this wall is here and what it's made of.
The woodcutter answered,
Just cool your head and don't worry about the wall. If you climb up there, you'll know what's on the other side.
After some time, the ladder was completed. The ladder looked a little flimsy, but the Tin Woodman was confident it was strong enough to climb the wall. The scarecrow woke Dorothy, the lion and Toto and told them that the ladder was ready. The scarecrow climbed the ladder first, but it looked so clumsy and dangerous that Dorothy had to follow closely behind him to keep him from falling. The scarecrow let out a gasp as soon as he put his head above the top of the wall.
Wow, my goodness.
"Come on up."
And Dorothy cried out. The scarecrow climbed a little further and sat on the wall. Dorothy also put her face above the wall and exclaimed,
"Oh my goodness."
Just like the scarecrow, Toto climbed up onto the wall and started barking so loudly that Dorothy had to quiet him down. Next the lion climbed the ladder, and lastly the Tin Woodman. These two also looked beyond the wall.
Wow, my goodness.
And shouted. They all sat in a row on top of the wall and looked down at the amazing sight. Before them stretched a city with a smooth, shiny white floor like the bottom of a large plate. The many houses scattered here and there were all made of porcelain and were painted in bright colors. These houses were very small, the largest of which was only about as high as Dorothy's waist. Among them was a small, pretty barn with a ceramic fence. There were also many cows, sheep, horses, pigs, and chickens made of ceramics. But the most curious of all were the people who lived in this strange country. I saw a milkmaid and a shepherdess, both wearing brightly colored clothes with golden polka dots on their gowns. And there were princesses in very fancy dresses of gold, silver, and purple. There were also shepherds wearing shorts with pink, yellow and blue vertical stripes and shoes with gold buckles. Princes were also seen wearing crowns decorated with jewels on their heads and wearing silk clothes and ermine cloaks. There were also ridiculous clowns with red dots on their faces, tall, pointed hats, and frilly clothes. But what was most surprising was that all these people were made of porcelain, and even their clothes were made of porcelain. They were so small that the tallest one was about as high as Dorothy's knees. Apart from a small purple porcelain puppy with a head that was too big for its size, no one there seemed to notice Dorothy and her friends. The dog came towards the wall, barked at them in a small voice, and then ran away. Dorothy asked,
"How do I get down?"
The ladder was too heavy to lift, so the scarecrow jumped down from the wall to the floor. And then the other friends jumped down on top of the scarecrow without hurting their feet on the hard floor. Of course, they had to be careful not to get their feet pricked by the pins in the scarecrow's brain so they wouldn't jump on its head. After everyone was safely down, they raised the scarecrow and beat his flattened body back into shape. Dorothy said,
"To get to the other side, we have to cross this strange place, because it wouldn't be wise to go any direction other than south."
So they started walking through the land of the porcelain people. The first thing they encountered was a porcelain girl milking a porcelain cow. As they passed near, the cow was startled and suddenly kicked. The wind knocked the bucket, the chair the girl was sitting on, and even the girl herself all over the porcelain floor, making a loud clanging noise. Dorothy was shocked to see the cow's leg broken, the bucket shattered, and the poor girl's elbow bruised. The milkmaid got angry and screamed,
Hey, look what you guys did. My cow has a broken leg. I have to take it to a repair shop and have it reattached. Why do you come here and scare my cow?
Dorothy answered.
I'm so sorry. Please forgive us.
But the pretty girl was so angry that she didn't answer at all. She picked up the broken leg of the cow with a sullen expression and led the cow away. The poor cow was limping on 3 legs. The girl walked away, her injured elbow pressed against her side, looking longingly over her shoulder at these inexperienced strangers. Dorothy was heartbroken by this accident. The warm-hearted woodcutter said,
We have to be very careful here. Otherwise, I might hurt these pretty little people beyond repair.
As she walked a little further, Dorothy met a young princess dressed in a very beautiful dress. The princess saw the strangers, suddenly stopped walking and started running away. Dorothy wanted to see the princess better, so she followed her. Then the porcelain girl screamed,
Don't chase me, don't chase me.
At the princess's frightened little voice, Dorothy stopped and asked.
Why are you so scared?
The princess stopped at a safe distance and answered.
Because if I fall while running, I might break.
Dorothy asked.
If that's the case, can't it be fixed?
The princess answered.
Of course, it can be fixed. But as you know, the repaired area is not pretty at all.
Dorothy said.
I guess so.
The porcelain girl continued talking.
There's this clown named Joker, and he's always trying to do a handstand. Because of that, it broke here and there often and I had to repair it in over 100 places. So it looks very ugly. Oh, there he is coming. You'll know when you see it with your own eyes.
A little clown was walking towards them, laughing really cheerfully. Even though he wore a fancy red, yellow and green clown costume, Dorothy could still see the cracks and repair marks that covered his entire body. The clown put his hands in his pockets, puffed out his cheeks, and bowed his head with a mischievous expression.
Beautiful lady, why are you staring at me? Poor old Joker. You are very stiff. You are so fresh, like someone swallowing a poker.
The princess said.
Be quiet, don't you see these people? Can't you be a little more polite?
Treating me with respect, that's what I wanted.
The clown who answered said that and immediately did a handstand. The princess said to Dorothy.
Don't worry about the Joker. He had a very badly broken head. I became a fool after that.
Dorothy said.
Yes, I don't care about him at all. But you are really beautiful. I like you so much. When I go back to Kansas, I'd like to take you with me and put you on Aunt Em's mantelpiece. Would you allow me to do so? I can put you in my basket.
The porcelain princess answered.
Then I would be very unhappy. As you can see, we are all living happily here. We can talk and wander around as we please. But if any of us leave this place, we're immediately frozen solid, pretty though it may look, and we're left standing there unable to move. Of course, all people expect from us is to just stand still on a shelf, a dresser, or a living room table. But our lives will be happier here in our country.
Dorothy said.
No matter what happens, I don't want to make you unhappy. Well then, I guess I'll have to say goodbye. I'm fine.
The princess answered.
Goodbye.
Dorothy and her friends walked carefully through the porcelain land. Small animals and people would run away quickly when they saw strangers, fearing that they would be broken. After about an hour, our travelers arrived at another porcelain wall on the opposite side of the city. This wall wasn't as high as the one we first encountered, so they were able to climb up the wall by stepping on the lion's back. Then the lion put all his legs together and jumped up onto the wall. But at the moment the lion leapt, the porcelain church was hit by his tail and shattered into pieces. Dorothy said.
Oh, dear. But it was fortunate that it passed without causing any harm to these little people, except for damaging one cow's leg and one church. These people are really fragile.
The scarecrow said.
Absolutely. I'm so thankful I'm made of rags and don't get hurt easily. There are worse things in the world than living as a scarecrow.
Chapter 21. The Lion Becomes the King of Beasts. Our travelers, coming down from the porcelain wall, found themselves in a very unpleasant place, full of swamps and mud and overgrown with tall grass. The overgrown grass obscured their view, making it very difficult to walk without falling into mud puddles. But by carefully choosing their path and taking their steps, they were finally able to reach solid ground safely. But from there the road seemed to get rougher than before. After a long and tiring walk through low bushes, they entered another forest. The trees growing in this forest seemed larger and older than any forest they had ever passed through. The lion looked around and said with joy,
This forest is absolutely fantastic. I've never seen a more beautiful place than here.
The scarecrow said.
I look dark.
The lion said.
No, not at all. I want to live here for the rest of my life. Feel how soft the dry leaves are under your feet. Look how moist and green the moss on these old trees is. Surely there is no better sanctuary for wild animals than here.
Dorothy said.
I think there are wild beasts in this forest too.
The lion answered.
Maybe so, but I don't see a single one.
They continued walking through the forest until it became too dark to go any further. As the night grew deeper, Dorothy, Toto and the lion lay down to sleep, while the woodman and the scarecrow stood guard all night as usual. When morning came they set out again. Before they got far, they heard a low growl, like the growling of numerous animals. Toto was a little nervous, but they were not afraid and continued walking along the path. They came to a clearing in the forest where hundreds of animals of all kinds were gathered. Dorothy felt a moment of fear when she saw the tigers, elephants, bears, wolves, and foxes there, but the lion explained that the animals were having a meeting. He said they seemed to have a serious problem because they were howling and growling. When the lion spoke, some of the animals saw him. Then, as if by magic, the huge crowd suddenly became quiet. The biggest tiger among them approached the lion, bowed down and said,
Welcome, King of Beasts. You have come at a time when we need you most. Help us fight our enemies and bring peace back to all the animals in the forest.
The lion asked in a calm voice.
What's the problem?
The tiger answered.
We are all threatened by a fierce enemy that recently appeared in this forest. It's a huge monster that looks like a big spider. It is as big as an elephant and has 8 long legs like a tree trunk. The monster crawls through the forest, catching animals with its long legs, bringing them to its mouth and devouring them in one gulp, like a spider catching a fly. None of us can be safe as long as that monster lives. So we called a meeting to discuss what to do. And then you came. Am I one for an ups?
The lion thought for a moment and then asked.
Are there any other lions in this forest?
There were a few, but they were all eaten by monsters. Besides, those lions weren't as big and brave as you.
The lion asked again.
If I deal with your enemies, will you bow down to me and serve me as the king of this forest?
I will gladly do so.
The tiger answered immediately. Then all the other animals shouted in a loud voice.
I would be happy to do so.
The lion asked.
Where is that big spider now?
The tiger pointed to a place with his forepaw and said.
It's in the oak forest over there.
The lion said.
Then I'll leave my friends to you for a moment. I'm going to go fight that monster right away.
The lion said goodbye to his friends and walked proudly to fight his enemies. The spider was lying down and sleeping when the lion found it. The spider was so hideous that the lion could not help but turn his head away in disgust. The guy's legs were very long, just like the tiger said, and his body was covered with thick black fur. Its large mouth was lined with sharp teeth about 30 centimeters long, but the head was connected to a plump body by a neck as thin as a wasp's waist. Seeing this, the lion thought of a good way to attack this monster. When it occurred to him that it would be easier to attack the monster while it was asleep than when it was awake, the lion jumped up and landed directly on the monster's back. The spider's head fell off its body as the lion struck down with its powerful forelegs, raising all its sharp claws. The lion jumped down to the ground and watched until the spider's long legs stopped writhing. He could tell that the monster was completely dead. The lion returned to the clearing where the forest animals were waiting for him and said proudly,
You no longer need to fear your enemies.
Then all the animals bowed down to the lion who had become their king. The lion promised that as soon as Dorothy was safely back in Kansas, he would return to the forest and rule over them. Chapter 22 The Land of Quadlings. So our 4 travelers passed safely through the rest of the forest. As they emerged from the dark forest, a steep hill covered entirely with rocks appeared before them. The scarecrow said,
It looks very difficult to climb up, but we have to get over this hill.
The scarecrow who said so walked ahead, and the rest followed him. As they approached the first rock, they heard a harsh voice shouting,
Get out!
Who are you?
And the scarecrow said. Then a head suddenly appeared above the rock and spoke in the same voice.
This hill is ours. No one can pass through here.
The scarecrow said.
But we have to get through here. We are going to the land of Quadlings.
Absolutely not.
And the voice answered. Behind the rock where the voice came from was a strange-looking man they had never seen before. He was very short and stocky, with a large, flat head supported by a thick, wrinkled neck. But he had no arms. The Scarecrow, seeing this sight, was not at all afraid, thinking that the poor man would not be able to stop him from getting over the hill. So the Scarecrow walked away confidently and said,
I'm sorry I can't do what you want. But we have to get over this hill whether you like it or not.
Then, as fast as lightning, the man's neck stretched out and his head shot forward, hitting the Scarecrow's chest with the flat part of his crown. The Scarecrow fell over and rolled down the hill. His head returned to its original position in the blink of an eye. The man laughed heartily and said,
It won't be as easy as you think.
Then, a loud laughter erupted from behind the other rocks at the same time. Dorothy looked as if hundreds of armless hammerheads were standing on the hill, one hiding under each rock. The lion became very angry when laughter erupted because of what had happened to the Scarecrow. So he roared loudly like thunder and ran up the hill. Again the head popped out quickly, and the great lion rolled down the hill as if hit by a cannonball. Dorothy ran and lifted the Scarecrow up. The lion came to Dorothy with his bruised and wounded body and said,
It's no use fighting people who blow their heads off. I don't think anyone can beat them.
Dorothy asked.
Then what should we do?
The Tin Woodman suggested.
Let's call the winged monkey. You can still give one more order.
Good idea.
Dorothy immediately put on her golden hat and recited the spell. The monkeys appeared immediately as they had done before and stood before Dorothy.
What are your orders?
The chief monkey bowed to Dorothy and asked. Dorothy answered.
Take us to the Quadling country beyond this hill.
I will do that.
As soon as the chief monkey answered, the winged monkeys flew into the sky with the four travelers and Toto in their arms. As they passed over the hill, the hammerheads shouted in annoyance and shot their heads high into the air. But the head did not reach where the winged monkey was flying. The monkeys dropped Dorothy and her friends off in the beautiful land of the Quadlings, over the hill. The chief monkey said to Dorothy,
This is the last command you gave us. Goodbye. I wish you good luck.
Goodbye, thank you so much.
And Dorothy answered. The monkeys flew into the sky and disappeared in an instant. The land of the Quadlings seemed rich and happy. The fields were full of ripe grain, and there were many well-paved roads running through them. There were sturdy bridges over the trickling streams. The fences, houses, and bridges were all painted red. It was like yellow in Winky's country and blue in Munchkin's country. The Quadlings were short, fat, and good-natured people. They were all dressed in red, which stood out vividly against the backdrop of green fields and yellow ripened grain. The monkeys dropped them off near a farmhouse, so our four friends went to the house and knocked on the door. It was the farmer's wife who opened the door. When Dorothy asked for something to eat, the farmer's wife served them a wonderful meal, including 3 kinds of cake and 4 kinds of cookies. I gave Toto a bowl of milk to drink. Dorothy asked,
How far is Glinda's castle from here?
The farmer's wife answered,
It's not that far away. If you follow the road south, you'll get there in no time.
After thanking the kind lady, they set off again with renewed energy. After crossing several fields and pretty bridges, a very beautiful castle appeared before their eyes. In front of the gate stood 3 young ladies dressed in splendid red uniforms decorated with gold tassels. As Dorothy approached them, one of them said,
What brings you to this southern country?
Dorothy answered,
I came to meet the good witch who rules this place. Can you take me to him?
If you tell me your name, I will ask Glinda if she would like to meet you.
When Dorothy and her friends told her the name, the girl soldier went into the castle. When she returned a short time later, she told Dorothy and her friends that Glinda had given permission for the meeting. Chapter 23 Glinda the Good Witch grants Dorothy's wish. But before they met Glinda, they were led to a room in the castle. There, Dorothy washed and combed her hair, and the lion shook his mane to shake off the dust. The Scarecrow made himself look as good as he could, and the woodcutter polished his tin body and oiled his joints. When they were all dressed up, they followed the girl soldier into the large room where the witch Glinda sat on a ruby-adorned throne. Glinda looked really beautiful and young. Her rich red hair flowed in waves over her shoulders. Glinda, dressed in a pure white dress, looked at the little girl with affectionate blue eyes. Glinda said,
How can I help you, little miss?
Dorothy told the witch Glinda everything that had happened. He told of how a whirlwind had brought him to the land of Oz, and how he had met his friends, and of all the wonderful adventures they had had. Dorothy added at the end,
My biggest wish right now is to go back to Kansas. Mrs. M will be worried because she thinks something bad has happened to me, and if this year's crop is not as good as last year's, Uncle Henry won't be able to bear it any longer.
Glinda leaned forward and gave Dorothy a soft kiss, then looked up at the lovely little girl. Glinda said,
May your good heart be blessed. I can show you how to get back to Kansas, but first you have to give me the golden hat.
Dorothy shouted, I'll be happy to give it to you.
It's really of no use to me now. If you have this hat, you can give 3 commands to the winged monkeys.
Glinda answered with a smile.
I think there are only 3 times when I would need the monkey's help.
The witch who received the golden cap from Dorothy asked the Scarecrow,
What are you going to do when Dorothy leaves?
The Scarecrow answered,
I will return to the Emerald City. Oz has made me the ruler of that place, and the people like me. But one thing I'm worried about is how to get past those Hammerhead's hills.
Glinda said,
I will use the golden cap to command the winged monkeys to take you to the gates of the Emerald City. We cannot take away from those people a great ruler like you.
The Scarecrow asked,
Am I really that great?
Glinda answered,
Because you are special.
Glinda asked the Tin Woodman a question.
What will you do when Dorothy leaves for her own country?
The woodcutter leaned on his axe in thought for a moment, and then he said,
The Winkies were kind to me, and wanted me to rule over them after the wicked witch died. I like Winkies too. If I could go back to the Western country, I would like to rule over them and live there forever.
Glinda said,
My second command to the winged monkeys is to take you safely to Winky's land. Your brain may not be as big as a scarecrow's, but if you sharpen it well, it will shine much brighter. I trust you will rule the Winkies wisely.
And the witch looked at the big furry lion and asked,
What will you do when Dorothy returns home?
The lion answered,
Beyond the hills of the Hammerheads there is a very large and old forest. All the animals living there made me their king. If I could go back to that forest, I would live there happily for the rest of my life.
Glinda said,
The third command I give to the winged monkeys will be to take you to the forest. After I have used all the powers of the golden cap, I will return the cap to the king of the monkeys. Then they will no longer be restricted from freedom.
The Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and the lion were truly grateful for the good witch's kindness. Dorothy said,
You are not only beautiful, but also kind, but you still haven't told me how to get back to Kansas.
Glinda answered,
The silver shoes you are wearing will take you beyond the desert. If you had known the power of those shoes, you could have returned to Ontem on the very day you came to this country.
Then the Scarecrow shouted,
But if that were the case, I wouldn't have had this wonderful brain. I guess I spent my whole life in a farmer's cornfield.
The Tin Woodman also said,
I wouldn't have gotten this lovely heart either. I would have rusted away standing in the forest until the end of the world.
The lion also spoke loudly.
I would have lived as a coward forever. There probably wasn't a single animal in the forest that said anything nice to me.
Dorothy said,
Yeah, that's right. I'm so happy that I met such great friends, but now that I've gotten what I wanted, and now that I'm happy with a kingdom to rule as a bonus, I want to go back to Kansas.
The good witch said,
Those silver shoes have mysterious powers. One of them is that it can take you anywhere in the world with just 3 steps. It only takes the blink of an eye to take 1 step. All you have to do is tap your heels together 3 times and tell them to take you where you want to go.
Dorothy said with joy.
If that's the case, I'll tell you to take me to Kansas right now.
Dorothy hugged the lion's neck and kissed his large head gently. Then he kissed the Tin Woodman, who was sobbing so hard his whole body was in danger. But instead of kissing the Scarecrow's face for fear of erasing the painted face, Dorothy hugged the soft, rag-stuffed body tightly in her arms. When the sad moment of parting with her beloved friends came, Dorothy also burst into tears. The good witch Glinda came down from her ruby throne and gave the young girl a goodbye kiss. Then Dorothy thanked Glinda for her kindness to her and her friends. Finally, Dorothy hugged Toto tightly in her arms and said her final goodbye. Dorothy said, tapping the heels of her silver shoes 3 times,
Take me to Aunt M.
Immediately Dorothy rose into the air and spun around. It happened so quickly that all Dorothy could see and feel was the sound of the wind passing by her ears. The silver shoes took 3 steps and then suddenly stopped. So Dorothy rolled over the grass so many times that she couldn't tell where she was. But finally Dorothy sat up, looked around, and cried out,
Oh, thank you, God.
Dorothy was sitting on the vast plains of Kansas. Before Dorothy's eyes stood the new house that Uncle Henry had built instead of the old house that had been blown away by the tornado. Uncle Henry was milking the cows in the barn. Toto jumped out of Dorothy's arms and ran towards the barn, barking excitedly. Dorothy woke up and realized she was only wearing socks. The silver shoes fell off while flying through the sky and fell into the desert, disappearing forever. Chapter 24 Home. As Aunt Em was leaving the house to water the cabbage patch, she saw Dorothy running toward her.
Our baby!
The old woman hugged Dorothy tightly and kissed her all over her face.
Where on earth have you been?
Dorothy answered with a serious face.
I went to the land of Oz. Oh, Auntie Em, I'm so happy to be back home.
Dorothy is happy to be reunited with her family, but she cannot forget the friends she met in Oz. And through the adventures they have with you, you learn the value of courage and friendship. The story of the Wizard of Oz reminds us of courage, hope, and the value of friendship. As Dorothy and her friends showed, we too can overcome adversity and pursue our dreams. Thank you for watching the entire Wizard of Oz story so far. Story Narae will come back with another story. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story.